Chapter 17. Ach! David rolled to his knees in the bottom of the cockpit and fought the urge to vomit. The stink was so putrid, so vile, some kind of rotten fish odor mixed with hot breath and sticky seawater. He couldn't stand it, a thick stink, a rotten, rich, thick stink that filled every corner of his sleep and awakened him and drove him to his knees before his eyes were even open. He dry heaved 3 times, controlled it, and rose to his feet, rubbing his eyes to see what had happened. There was something sticky in his hair and down the back of his neck, and he wiped it off gingerly. When it stuck to his fingers, he wiped them on a towel. The bay was alive with whales. He had slept the afternoon away, and it was getting close to dusk, although there was still plenty of sun showing over the water and hills to the west and all around him. All around the boat in the bay were whales, huge whales, gray whales, wonderful whales. Before he could take in the whole scene, an enormous leap-back rolled out of the water near the frog, and a whale blew, a mighty vaporous cloud of breath, and sprayed all its lungs, expelled air, and David caught the same odor that had covered him while he slept. A whale must have surfaced right next to the frog and blown on him. Talk about bad breath. Rotten krill, shrimp, plankton, small fish, they ate it all, mixed with gallons of what? Snot? God, maybe that's what was in his hair. Maybe the whale blew on him, had a cold yuck. He grabbed the towel and scrubbed his hair and neck, then rinsed the towel over the side. He could not be sure of the kind of whale because he didn't know enough to identify them, but he thought they might be blues, and they literally almost filled the bay. A whole pod of them must have come in while he slept. Some small, he saw several with calves, and some large and so immense they seemed to fill the sea, fill the world, and they were all around him. One rose out of the water, his head high in the air, then fell over with a mighty booming splash, and as if on single, another rose and yet another until whales were rising and falling all around him. A gigantic set of flutes came out of the water, not 50 feet away, and splashed down so hard the water sprayed all over David and left half an inch to drain out of the cockpit as well. Beyond the first one, another set of flukes rose, waved, and then crashed down and was followed immediately by 2 more whales that raised their front halves out of the water and fell over. As for me, David thought, alone here in the bay, the whales are for me and for the frog. See them, frog? See them dance for us? He wished intensely that he had somebody to share it with, and that wish made him think of his parents, and Owen, in turn, made him think of them, miss them, so that it almost stopped his breath. He forced his mind back to the whales. He could not be sure how many there were because some went down while others came up, and there was a great splashing confusion. And the whales kept up the activity until well after dark. David opened a can of beef stew and ate the whole can. With his shrunken stomach, it filled him burstingly, and still the whales tore the bay apart. It was clear night, and half a moon gave light, and he watched them, swiveling his head to see one, then another, rise and crash back. And he realized after a time that he didn't feel alone while they were there. They were more than just something to interest him. They became friends, and when they left, moving, splashing out of the bay in the middle of the night, he watched them with growing sadness. When he could see them no longer, not even the spouts pluming moisture into the faint moonlight, he raised a hand, standing at the stern holding the boom, and waved with a small motion, a sad little wave, and knew that he could not stay any longer in the bay. Knew that it was time to go. He untied the mainsail and pulled it up, then loosened the jib and drew it up as well. Both sails luffed in the night breeze, which was still light and spotty because of the surrounding hills. The anchor had bitten deep as he slept, and he strained on the rope to pull the frog forward and tugged the anchor loose. He coiled the rope and chain neatly, as they'd been when he started to anchor, and put them back beneath the captain's bunk. Then he drank some water. The steward left him thirsty and went back to the cockpit. She backed easily in the smooth water, came around, and filled quickly. The wind was still out of the north, and he had run almost downwind back to the entrance of the bay. It was easy to see the two arms of sand that made the entrance in the moonlight, and he centered between them and almost scooted out of the bay into the open sea. The swells took the frog immediately. They were larger than when he had come in and had a purpose to them, a rapid movement in spite of their size that almost triggered alarm bells in David's brain. He knew now that the swells were telegraph systems, that they came ahead of the weather, and that small swells moving this hard and fast probably meant a fair storm. He thought of turning and going back into the bay to ride it out, but decided against it. The storm might be days getting to him, might not come at all, and he didn't have much food and fishing wasn't going that well. He did not know for certain where he was, except that it was somewhere down along the Baja coast, and he knew that if he didn't get sailing, didn't move, didn't use the wind and sea, he would never get home. So he hated just to sit. Once clear of land, he brought her around up into the wind until she was tacking northwest and making a solid 6 knots. She hit the swells fairly hard, the bow slamming down on every fourth or fifth one, but he held her, heeling well, under the full sail for 7 hours until just before dawn when the storm came.